there's definitely questions that I'm sure the flight attendants and the dispatchers have. So local 577, that covers the flight attendants, and then local 592, that covers the dispatchers over at Sun Country. They have contracts that they fought really hard for. Are those contracts at risk with this deal once it closes?
No, in the short term, and in the long term, they're going to become center stage. Let me explain. Two separate airlines, we keep talking about that. The contracts are our centerpiece, our protection, our unity, our union. They're in full force. And we've got to keep them in full force. And you know the TWU, we don't miss an inch. So there's not going to be a change there. But at some point in the process, another government agency steps in, the National Mediation Board, whose job it is to oversee labor relations, union relations. It's the union labor law for the airlines. At some point, we're going to have to decide, the workers and the government, which union will ultimately represent the flight attendants. We know what it's going to be. Then it's going to be which union is going to represent our dispatchers. Then we're going to have to take two collective bargaining agreements, CBAs, our contract, and they're going to have to be put into one joint, the idea, CBA, JCBA. That's a long time away from now, although you can start the process at any time, or at least informally at any time. But no, right now, nothing has changed in terms of our CBAs. Nothing should change in terms of work rules, which I will tell you, because I know you a while and your efforts and incredible union work, we're going to have to stay on top of this because we don't want anybody at the company misunderstanding the law nor the resolve of the TWU. And all of us, every dispatcher and every flight attendant has to monitor their contract and enforce it. But the short answer is nothing has changed.
So can the company just change the contract?
I'm going to give you a legal answer. No.
Good.
Cannot do that. They're in full force.
Okay, that's exactly what we want to hear. And do you know if there's an expected timeline of when we would actually see a JCBA?
There's no expected timeline, and the law doesn't even dictate that. So it can go faster, but the union has to agree to that. You have to have the National Mediation Board, again, weigh in. So it's hard to say an average. It could go from months, but it's much more likely years. Okay. Could be one, could be two, but the year period is one that is more prevalent in our historical past.
Okay. And I know that you mentioned, that flight attendants and dispatchers will need to be on top of their contracts. And can you just explain why it's so important for them to actually know what's in their contract right now, today?
So this might shock people, and this is not an indictment of management, but sometimes leaders, an in-flight or a manager over the desks at dispatch, think they can change things right now. They can't. And so we have to be as unified as we've ever been, and these are two great locals and a great international, to make sure we remind them of what the law is and what our resolve is. No, we should all police our contracts. We should know how it works for two reasons. One is to make sure nothing is encroached upon now, and it's not going to be. And two, when we get in eventually to that joint CBA, taking one union contract at Sun Country, another union contract at Allegiant, we join them and we try to make them the floor. Like, you look towards the best of the two contracts. And I've been involved with both locals, and I was involved with your very first contract. Yes. And your latest contract, which by the way is pretty rock star.
It really is.
And so we build upon that. We want to get even stronger contracts, and we will, through the joint negotiations for both dispatchers and flight attendants. We're the largest dispatcher union in the country. We know dispatch contracts. We know flight attendants. I've been doing flight attendant work since 1983. At Eastern Airlines was my first encounter with flight attendants, and it's just an honor to work with flight attendants. We're going to take these two contracts, put them together, and make them stronger.
Great. So if a member thinks, oh, my contract is locked in I don't need to pay attention. They're missing something, right?
Yes, you're my client, you're my bosses, but I'm going to talk straight to you. Don't think that. That is absolutely not the case. The more diligent we are, the more we pay attention, the stronger we're going to be when we go into JCBA negotiations, two contracts coming together. You need to know your contract. You need not to have someone explain it to you from management incorrectly. And we expect good relationships with management during this period of time, but we also are on top of our game. We're bringing our A game every day. Not only do you as a union leader, our international, the local leaders, bring their A game, and you all are on top of your game, but so do the members have to bring their A game, because we need to hear if anything's happening on the line. We need to hear if they're trying in any way to whittle down any of our work rules and our protections. Who are our best eyes and ears? The workers, the TWU members. Please stay on top of everything that's going on, because that makes us even stronger during this process.
So there have been a lot of questions about which union will represent us. So can you walk us through how that process works exactly?
Sure. So because of all the many airline mergers that have taken place, there's a whole body of law, including statutes that were passed in Congress, to try to deal with both bringing two contracts together, but bringing two workforces together. And one of the centerpiece questions is seniority. Seniority at Allegiant, seniority at Sun Country. And remember, we're at both airlines. Our dispatchers are at Sun Country, and our flight attendants are at Allegiant. And so we call that seniority integration. So the contracts have to be integrated. Everybody remembers JCBA, Joint Collective Bargaining Agreement, but so do the seniority lists. And I don't have to tell a single dispatcher or flight attendant what is the importance of seniority. It is central to your work life, affects days off, vacations, family needs, quality of work life. We all get it. And so that process is going to be dealt with both on a legal level, and it's going to be dealt with through bargaining. Where does it start? It starts with the National Mediation Board. The National Mediation Board, at some point, months, but much more likely well beyond a year, has to come in and make its determination if the two airlines are a single carrier. Now remember, the business plan is to operate separately. So if the owners of the business, if this is approved on the 13th of May, the owners of the business have said, we're keeping them separate for a while. They're one owner running two separate airlines. So both the JCBA and the seniority integration are months, if not years away. But we are working on it yesterday because we're the TWU. And so the question in seniority is, how do you put those lists together? You can't really officially do that. You can do it informally and talk about it until the NMB says you're a single carrier. What does that mean? Does it mean that you have one HR department? Yes. Does it mean that work rules are combined? Yes. And they have a whole bunch of checklists that they go down when they do an investigation. Is it truly, from a worker point of view, one airline, a single carrier? At that point, you begin to get into JCBA negotiations, which we'll talk about in a moment, but then we also are going to have to talk about seniority integration. And there's a whole body of law and a bunch of history on, look at all the airlines that have come together, look at all the airlines that have been acquired or merged. And so I can talk more about that with you as we go on.
That would be great. So with the NMB determining the single transportation system existing, is there always an election?
No, but I also want to go back. Before the NMB sort of does that, the FAA has to also determine, right, if we can get a single operating certificate. You have to get approval from the FAA to run one airline. They're looking at things. They have actually a 6-step process. It's all complicated. Safety's at the center of it. And they say, you know what? We're going to legally let them be one airline. That's on the government aviation side of it. On the labor union worker side, and thank goodness you have a union. 90% of Americans wake up every morning without a union card. I find that worker malpractice. It doesn't make sense that everybody in the world, lawyers, doctors, realtors, pharmacists, you can go on and on and on, have their own professional organization. We have a union, and for some reason, 90% of Americans sadly don't have that. They don't have a contract. We do. And that is something every worker in America should be doing.